Forbes Books presents Leading What Matters Most, the podcast that helps you change behaviors, improve performance, and unlock the potential of your people. Here's Phil Geldart.
I'm back with Dr. Chris Bray, the cognitive behavioral researcher, speaker, author, and founder of the Adaption Institute. We've been talking about how leaders can help unleash the potential of everyone around them. And Chris, one of the words you used in part one of our talk is trust, which I think is key. If I'm a leader and I really want to get it right, and I really want to practice some of the things we've been chatting about, I think the place to start is really to earn the trust of those we're leading. If I act in such a way that you trust me, then immediately we have a dialogue, we have a conversation. We would be able to talk about things that we might not otherwise have been able to chat through. So leaders who are saying, how do I actually behave this way and do this? I think what they need to do is focus on being trustworthy, on being honest, on being transparent. I think they really need to listen to what people are saying, and they themselves need to speak with integrity.
People know whether or not what you're doing is authentic and it's vulnerable, and they know your motives. Now, I will say the awareness, when someone usually enters the workplace for about the first 2 or 3 years, they're all about being promoted and getting in. But people then, the brain, I say, turns on in different ways or works in different ways with our mirror neurons, that all of a sudden I'm going to know if what you're doing is authentic. We can always tell if that person is more interested, the leader's more interested in, hey, we need this performance versus, hey, this person is interested in me, they trust me, and I trust them. And like you said earlier, that's when you get, I would say, remarkable, innovative, creative performance in ways that will shock you when you have both sides of that equation, the personal side and the professional side, and you have that trust and that open dialogue and communication. And here's a great thing. It doesn't mean you necessarily need to be great friends. No, it just means that you work in a way together that just helps move things forward. You're cheering each other on, you're helping each other through hardship and challenges. And when you have failures, because we're all going to have them in the workplace, that then the leader and the direct report, that individual, then are helping each other. Because guess what? Oftentimes the leader needs feedback just as much.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I keep thinking, we talk about leaders, but leaders are employees to other leaders. It works your way all the way up. It's, yes, I'm a leader, but for somebody else, I'm an employee, and my leader needs to treat me with respect and build a trust. It cascades all the way down through the organization. Let me shift gears with us, Chris, here for a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about corporate culture. So I now have a leader. They're in the organization. They really want to release human potential, the person, but the corporate culture has to foster that. So I know you've got a lot of thinking on that, but share some of your thoughts around the importance of culture. Can culture squelch this? Can culture get in the way of what we're trying to achieve? How do we build a culture that essentially creates an environment where this can flourish?
I love this discussion, and I'm going to even...
Another hour, right?
Take one step back, is when we look at culture, it goes really back to what we just talked about. It starts at the relationship between the leader and the individual and that team. That's where the culture really, really matters, because that's who you're working with, you're seeing every day. Now, we know, though, that culture starts at the top and then filters down as we go through. But for individuals, it's that everyday interaction, and really the huge difference a leader can make if the culture is bad in an organization, to change those things, because the culture every day can either wear that person out, can make it so they're not functioning well mentally, emotionally, performance-wise, or it can do the opposite. It just invigorates us in what we do. So, for example, let's say that an individual is all about, hey, I love my job, I love what I do, but I want to make sure that the work I'm doing, I can see the end result. Well, what we found is that leader will play more of a role than any newsletters that come down from the top of the organization saying, here's how we're helping out people, or little emails or videos. But it's the interaction and the actions of that leader and that team that will create that microculture bubble for those individuals. And what happens then is, yes, we know that culture comes down, but then all of a sudden that group will get noticed. Hey, something about them gels. Something about them is different on that team. And we've all been to meetings where you see one team and you're like, wait, I want to be on that team. I don't know why, because that boss sure holds people accountable. she's phenomenal at what she does. A little scary sometimes, but I want to be on that team because they act in a different way. And then that culture expands. But if organizations think I can send out emails or I can use certain verbiage, it just doesn't work that way. It goes from the top to the bottom, but then of course from the bottom right back to the top. That can change that culture. And which is sometimes hard because everybody has different values and things that are important to them to be able to create a culture. But then we get to things that humans love, like, humans not just love, but need. We know that humans need to connect. We know that humans need to be seen, need to be recognized, that humans want to be praised for the work that they're doing. When you have those things as the foundation of your culture, your organization is going to thrive.
When we go in to do a culture transformation within a company, we try to start at the very top for that very reason. And often an executive will say, well, that's fine. I'll just write your check. You go do your thing. And I go, well, I'm glad for the check, but that doesn't work that way. You have to actually yourself model the culture you want. And if you as the senior executive team do not model the behaviors, they will not cascade down. You may get a little micro pocket somewhere, but you will not get an organization that fits with what you want. And they wrestle with that. And I said, well, you're chatting with me because you're not happy with the results. They go, yeah, that's right. The results need to improve. Okay, well, the results come from the behavior of the people. Right. Well, if you don't like what the people are behaving, you got to look at yourself and say, okay, so how should we behave to model the behavior that we want within the organization? And I think that this culture, as you've just said, kind of coming from the top down, is more about what people do and how people feel within the organization than what is being said or put up on the wall or what is being written.
Oh, perfect. And maybe let me flip the tables here, Phil, and ask you a question and you can give information, because we know that more judgments, more information is given in micro moments that leaders see. So when they're walking down a hall, when they give an introduction to something, or somebody that's going to speak, these little small, because oftentimes we don't get to, especially working from home, we don't get to see leaders as often as you would like to, but it's those micro moments that people are honing in on and focusing, saying, is this person going to exemplify our values, can exemplify our culture and what we want to do? How do you coach them to create these micro moments versus, we can put all these great things on the walls. Everybody does. We can send out these emails and flashy things that you can put around your desk or your cubicle. How do you create those micro moments of culture, really?
It's a great question, Chris. You have definitely turned the tables here. I do have a thought, though. When we work with executives, we tell them that there are three things that have to happen. They must model the behavior, they must coach the behavior, and they must require the behavior. So if I'm in a micro moment, it does me no good to say something that the moment I say it, the person looks at me and says, yeah, but you don't do that. We are really committed to customers. Yeah, when's the last time you talked to one? We are really committed as an organization to safety. Well, when's the next time you went to a factory and put on a hard hat and asked people about the safety stats? So if you do not live what it is you want, it won't work. So, and that's at every level. So regardless of, you must be a model. The second thing is, if I see you model the behavior, I am then going to go, okay, but I'm not exactly sure how to do it. You make it look so easy. You seem to, so will you help me? And so the leader needs to be able to coach. And typically, coaching is seen as sort of this long, complicated dialogue between two people. And we do something called napkin-based coaching, which literally occurs between one meeting and the other. It's just, I respect you. This is what I saw. If I were you, I'd be doing it this way. And the person appreciates that. So it's not criticism for what you did. It's more based on my experience and the things which has worked well for me. Let me share them with you. And so the person gets that in the moment. And then the third, which if you're a really great leader, you really don't need to do very often, but is require. If you work in a culture that has values, you cannot tolerate people who do not abide by those values. So if you take a very simple example, if our culture is committed to safety and I see an individual not committed to safety, I say, look, our company, I don't have time for that. People are going to learn by their mistakes. Who cares? Well, I respect that that's how you feel, but you probably need to find an organization where your values are aligned with their values. But in our organization, you don't have the choice to let people behave in an unsafe manner or be disrespectful to another human being or not be a team player. Those are the things which we value. And I respect that you may not value them, but in this organization, this is how we function. So this requiring puts some, I don't want to say teeth, but actually puts substance to what it is that I am doing. We want people to behave in a certain way. I behave that way. I'm willing to coach you, and I would like to do everything I can to help you behave that way. But if that's not the way you want to behave, that's okay. It's just it can't happen here. So that would be the way I would do that. Model, coach, require.
Don't give away too much free advice here.
No, but it's a great question, and you need to do that. You need to go through that process.
I appreciate that, because that is solid, really good advice, and I love how you measure that out. And here are the three things that you need to do, and maybe give a little research behind exactly what you said.
Please.
When we asked individuals, it could be from senior level executives all the way to frontline workers, tell us about a moment that a leader made a difference. It was that napkin moment every single time. Like 98% of the time when someone said, well, I was walking down the hall and the leader grabbed me and said, you are doing this so well and this good. Hey, think about this. This may be something that's going to help you out. And it was the side moments. And I sometimes call them celebrity moments, because, poor celebrities go out and they, have to shake hands and kiss babies' heads and all those things. But it's those moments that the leader isn't in a leader position, that they're walking somewhere or then the meeting and they go up to someone they normally wouldn't go up to and shake their hand and say, it's good to see you. Hey, I heard you did this. Boy, people remember it for decades. How many retirement parties I've been at when what's funny is the leader will never remember it. Maybe a leader, but the person will bring it up. 20 years ago, you came and did a meeting, and afterwards you grabbed me and said, hey, great win on this and this, or with this client. And they remember it decades later. It's those, I love how you said napkin moments, celebrity moments.
I haven't thought of this for a long time, Chris, but I will give you a flip side of exactly what you said. I was a senior HR executive, and I was at a sales meeting. There was 100 salespeople there. And, it's a sales meeting, so I went in for the dinner. Being an executive, I did my thing and I left. And I made a point. I went and I chatted with everybody and, hi, how are you doing? And how's the course and the day and so on. 3 weeks later, somebody came to me and said that they're wondering when you're going to fire this individual. And I said, fire them? Why am I going to fire them? And they said, well, you were at the sales meeting 2 weeks ago. You spoke to everybody but this one person. So obviously you're going to fire them. And I went, are you kidding? No, I missed him. But I walked away realizing the importance of a word from a senior person into an organization that can have tremendous for good, as you just said. But if we are not sensitive and careful, we can do harm just by not being thoughtful. So it's back to what I call the mantle of leadership. If you're going to be a leader, boy, you really have to pay attention to how you are perceived and what you do and how you interact with people, because they are looking to you and they're just looking for the cues that you mentioned. And so that was fortunately relatively early in my career, and I've been a little more sensitive since. But it was a real wake-up call to the fact that it's not something I can just take for granted because I am the leader. Whatever I do is okay. It's not true. I have to. Somebody once told me, how you come across to others is too important to be left to chance. And that really summarized that for me. I have to be intentional about what I do if I'm going to assume the mantle of leadership.
I appreciate that example, because most leaders aren't thinking in that way. Everybody else will notice, hey, she didn't talk to me, or they passed by me, or they seemed happier when they talked to this person when they went to me. Leaders forget that it really is those personal moments. And I'll never forget, I've been with a company. It was a Fortune 10 company. I'd been there for probably 3 weeks. And I went to a meeting and I didn't realize everybody wore suits. And so I remember the senior VP of our division came up, and all I could think about for the rest of the 2 days of meetings is he's thinking, why did that guy, or can he afford, why did we hire him when he isn't wearing a suit jacket? Where what's funny is that leader came, shook my hand, was probably like, oh, look at this handsome young man that's working for us, but he wasn't thinking about that. For me, There is a great book I'm going to recommend that every leader I feel should read. And it's by David Brooks, and it's called How to Know a Person. And it is, and I love David Brooks books anyway, but it's a great way of all those small moments that you just said that leaders have to be aware of the impact, effect, and influence they have really with everyone, especially those sales meetings, big meetings. You have to be the celebrity because you are that goes around and really just is kind at shaking hands and building people up. People remember it. It's amazing.
I know one of the things that I found helpful is with my own executive team, I've said, listen, I really want you to tell me if you feel that I'm missing out, because it's never intentional. You're just a human being, you do your thing, but you need to have colleagues who are with you to help you not make mistakes that we're just going to make as a human being. And I think one of the byproducts of that, back to our earlier conversation, is it builds trust. If people can walk in with, okay, Phil, that was really stupid. Why in the world did you do that? Like, okay, but I appreciate that, because if you don't tell me, I don't know. And you can't get better without honest feedback. And the folks that are closest to you, especially your spouse, are the ones that can give that to you.
It's so true. And I love how you say that it's also the humility of you asking, let me know if you see something or someone that I need to go talk to. That humility of being a leader, because we see lots of times when a lot of these smaller organizations have very young leaders, maybe the startup's gone super well and it makes them a rock star. That rock star then needs to go out and just really build the trust and the connection with all the people at that organization versus, oh, look at what I've done. Spotlight's on me. That spotlight needs to turn from me to the group and to the team, because that will inspire people when they feel like they're loved and appreciated and seen. People are grateful for the work that they do every day.
Let me circle back to this conversation and link it back to culture again. If you have an organization where the leaders are behaving this way versus an organization where they are not, what do you see as the impact on the business? So in terms of, sure, obviously within the company, they may not be as productive, but in terms of their relationship with customers or their relationship with suppliers, what is the impact of a culture where the kind of behaviors we're talking about do not flourish versus when they do? How does that impact on the business and particularly the customers at the end?
What we see happen is a lot of those companies do flourish and do well, but it's a very different social model, meaning that I churn and burn through employees. So employees come in, they learn the culture, and they're out within a year or two. And same thing with customers. Hey, we find new customers. We're going to really focus on sales. The customers then buy the product, whatever it is, and they realize, hey, there's no customer service, or the culture's bad. And then they're out within a year, 18 months, or 2 years. Versus other companies who build that culture, we see them having customers and employees for decades and developing them. Even if they think they may leave, we're still going to develop you. And there is a much different effect on individual, because individuals who leave that first type of company, that's the churn and burn through the employees and through the customers, is they leave with very negative feelings. Almost sometimes I'd say PTSD from the workplace. And then on the opposite side, even if they left the company, the second type of company that really has a great culture, what is said is so different from those two different individuals. So one might say, I loved the company. They developed me. I highly recommend it. Go work for them. It was great for the time that I was there. Whereas other individuals will say, don't go there. So I see that effect coming on those, that first type of company that doesn't have a great culture. It catches up, but it's a much longer time because word has to spread and things have to happen for that to get out to be like, you don't want to go there. Now, I will say some individuals don't care and they think, hey, if I'm going to make an extra $20,000 or $30,000 a year, it's worth it, especially if I can work from home. I will agree to that social work contract. Whereas now we're finding people aren't doing that as much anymore. No way. Those companies then come to places like yours that say, help us change.
I agree. And I think you're quite right to say, some of those companies do flourish. But here's the thing. I think of it as if you have two products that you can purchase, one is perhaps twice the expense of the other, and you buy the cheaper product, you go, it's okay, I'm fine, it was good. And you never ask yourself, what would have happened if I bought the more expensive product? The more expensive product perhaps would have lasted longer. It would have been more durable. It would have served you better. It might have had greater functionality. But because you made a decision without fully appreciating why the cost was higher, you selected a lower, I'm just using cost here to make the point, but you select the lower cost product and you're happy with it. And in your happiness, you never challenge what could have been. And it's what we call good is the enemy of the best. So it's good, I'm happy, but your goodness kept you from actually saying, is there something better? And I feel often organizations that are satisfied with a culture that is adequate have never actually challenged to say, but sure, we're good and we're okay, but we could be dramatically better if the type of people we had reflected our earlier conversation where they were engaged and they were interested and they were empowered and they brought their initiative forward. And, wow, we could be a whole lot better, but they don't have that paradigm. And so they are complacent. And I once heard a great executive running a huge corporation saying, he was asked the question, what do you lie awake about it? And they were in the food business. And I thought, well, that's a dumb question. Obviously, he's worried about botulism, right? People could die. And his answer was, I am worried about complacency. I am worried that people will feel we're big and therefore we can make no mistakes. That was a very good question. Because the answer was so profound. And it's this complacency that keeps us from being great, I think, within an organization, even if they have a crummy culture.
And not just for the organization, but would you agree that it's also to the individual?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Complacent when we talk about human potential, and then all of a sudden a rock star comes and joins. And what does everybody first do? They hate him or her. They're just like, what? That person's just going crazy. They're doing such a good job. But it causes a self-reflection. It unlocks the human potential. And they think, well, wait a second. If they could do it, could I possibly be a rock star? And it's when they see this person doing much more and they were in complacency. Hey, I just go and I do my job. I don't do much else. That it wakes them up to their potential. And they think, wait a second. I got to do this. I got to be better. Look at all the success that they're having. I want to be that person. So that theory goes to a lot of different areas.
Wow. That's profound. That's great. Well, Chris, it has been wonderful chatting with you. Thank you so much for taking the time and for being with us today.
You bet. Glad to be here. Enjoyed it.
I've certainly enjoyed chatting with Chris. And if you'd like to connect with him and find out more about his organization, go to adaptioninstitute.com. That's adaptioninstitute.com. And that will do it for this episode of Leading What Matters Most. Please make sure to leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss any future episodes. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
This has been Leading What Matters Most with Phil Geldart. If you want to create a culture that drives performance and develop leaders that inspire and motivate, go to philgeldart.com. Leading What Matters Most is a production of Forbes Books.